One of the most fantastic realities of Jewish story and tradition is that the story that we tell over and over again, and indeed told many times tonight, even in our prayers, even embedded in one of our very famous holidays, favorite holidays, is the story of us being slaves in the land of Egypt. What society does that? What society remembers a time when historically our story was at its lowest part? Most of history is the history of power, of victory, of triumph, of wars waged and won. But our story always seems to go back to the fact that we were strangers in the land of Egypt, indeed enslaved and embittered. Our story not only goes back to there, but that through line is everywhere in the Kiddush that the kids had said tonight, in the story, in this Mi Chamocha that we sang, over and over in our prayer books and the Passover Seders. Remember, you were slaves in the land of Egypt at the end of the Ve'ahavta. Everywhere, we are supposed to remember that we were the other and what it feels like to be the other. So we leave Egypt and we wander in the desert. And last week's Torah portion, we come upon a mountain, and this mountain is trembling with thunder and lightning, and the people are in awe and afraid. And out of the smoke and the lightning and the fire comes a word from God that says, you are now obligated. You are obligated to the idea that there is one God in heaven and earth, that there is a day of rest, that you cannot steal, that you cannot covet, that you cannot murder. These obligations are upon you, and that becomes also part of our story. Not only that we were the other and enslaved in Egypt, but that therefore, upon leaving this enslavement, freedom means obligation. And it goes on from there. It goes on to this week's Torah portion to talk about what those obligations are. And those obligations, all the way through Torah into the prophets, indeed, the reason why we are Reformed Jews, prophetic Judaism, is that we are obligated to a morality and an ethical system. Obligated. Whatever you believe God to be, something bigger than ourselves has bound us to the memory of what it is to be the other and what it is to be obligated to live in a compassionate, moral society. In this week's Torah portion, you must not mistreat or oppress the stranger in any way. Remember, you yourselves were strangers in the land of Egypt. And then it goes on to say, you must not oppress strangers. You know what it feels like to be a stranger. You know what it feels like to be the other. We are commanded to have a sense of empathy and compassion. It is normal from the day that we are born to as we grow to draw a circle around ourselves. We are in and others are out. And that circle may be your friends, it may be your family, it may be your synagogue, it may be your faith. It's the popular kids in the high school halls, those that are in your circle and those that are out of your circle. And those that are out of our circle become the other. Whether they are people that don't think like us, or don't act like us, or don't look like us, or don't believe like us, and yet 36 times in the Torah we are commanded to love that other. As a matter of fact, Maimonides says, love your neighbor as yourself and love the stranger in your midst means that that other, that stranger, the person on the outer circle, that person is more than anything loved, because it's twice you're commanded to love that person. And so we live 100% in choice. We can choose empathy or fear, love or fear, ethical living or laziness, morality or irrational indifference, compassion versus hostility, sanctuary versus exclusion. And when we exclude, we Jews know better than other that when we are excluded because we remember being the stranger in a strange land, in ancient history and in current history, it dehumanizes, it encourages indifference. Exclusion, my friends, is a moral numbing agent. Has nothing to do with us. It's far away. I don't know anybody like that. I've got my own life. I'm busy. Two things I need to talk about tonight that in my wildest dreams I would never have put into one sermon. Let's first talk about the 200 tombstones that were overturned at University Cemetery near St. Louis. When I looked at those videos, I was struck by one thing, and that was the silence when the families walked into that cemetery with scraps of paper in their hands saying, "Oh my God, was it my family? Is it my family?" And I flashed back to the time and the many times we have taken our teenagers to Kolin in the Czech Republic. Kolin, a city that has no Jews in it anymore because all were perished in the Holocaust. And we, along with other communities, go back for one purpose only, to go to the cemetery. Because the locals do not tend to that cemetery. It is not clean, and the stones are overturned. And one year I remember in particular that we couldn't get the key to work at the gate, and the teens were so ready to go in and clean those overturned tombstones, they started to jump the wall. And I had to jump the wall after them. And we walked silently through the cemetery, tombstones broken. How is it that I can draw a line from the desecration of a Jewish cemetery from the days of World War II to the desecration of a Jewish cemetery today in St. Louis? The same day they discovered the desecration of that cemetery, there were 11 bomb threats that made total 69 bomb threats at JCCs in 53 communities over 26 states. The day they discovered that, the day there were 11 bomb threats at JCC, was President's Day. We had the day off. Perhaps we weren't paying attention. Our story and our moral code tells us empathy versus fear, love versus fear, ethical living versus laziness, morality versus irrational indifference, compassion versus hostility, sanctuary, where the circle is long and big and includes rather than excludes. The other needs to be inside of us. Some statistics. And I won't go into a lot of detail. You have a sheet of paper in your hands. 90% Americans today say they know somebody who is lesbian, gay, or bisexual. I want you to think back 10 years ago. Would you have been able to say that? It's a fact of life today. Our brothers, our sisters, our nephew, our nieces, our neighbors. 27% of millennials know somebody who's transgender. Ready for this? Only 9% of Americans over 45 know somebody who's transgender? Is that because they're not there? Do you remember having that conversation over homosexuality? We don't know anybody because they're exaggerating the numbers. 90% of transgender youth are verbally harassed. 55% are physically harmed. And every single one of them report that they skip one or more days of school because home is sanctuary, not school. Here at BJBE, PFLAG has been meeting for over 15 years. When I got here back in Glenview, it was starting to meet. I don't know, maybe Gloria, Shell, you can tell me when the meetings started to happen. Second Thursday of every month, they came along with us at 7:15. We have here gender-inclusive bathrooms, spread the word, a couple over at the JLC, 3 of them in this building. Empathy versus fear. Love versus fear. Why did I have to pick up the phone today and call the mother whose daughter is in transition now? Do you say son or do you say daughter? You must not oppress the other. You know what it feels like to be the other. You yourselves were once strangers in the land of Egypt. Ethical living versus laziness. Reach out to somebody you know. Compassion versus hostility. Sanctuary versus exclusion. Include within your circle somebody you know. Hatred breeds hatred. Whatever the question is, love must be the only answer. If you don't understand, if you are confused, educate yourself. But I want you to know, and I am glad there are many children here in this sanctuary now, our children are growing up in a state of bewilderment. And not to talk about these things at home is not to give them the mental toughness and the moral fabric and the vocabulary to deal with adversity. You cannot protect the children from the story of their lives or the story of this country. In fact, it is the story of our people. For once we were the other, enslaved and embittered. And we tell that story over and over again. And you know what? Because we have told it throughout the ages, we have become a people that perseveres and that is strong. Speak about this. Friends, this is not politics. This is sanctuary versus exclusion, fear versus compassion. It is the test of moral indifference. We are descendants of the prophets. This week's Torah portion commands us, obligates us to be empathetic, to feel the plight of the other. Because remember, we know what that feels like.
May the life I
May the
lead
life I lead
speak for me.
speak for me.
May the life I
May
lead
the life I lead
speak for me.
speak for me.
When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, may the life I lead
May the life I lead
speak for me.
speak for me.
May the stand I
May the
take
stand I take
speak for me.
speak for me.
May the stand I
May the stand
take
I take
speak for me.
speak for me.
When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, may the stand I take
May the stand I take
speak for me.
speak for me.
Love.
May the love I give
May the love I give
speak for me.
speak for me.
May the love I give speak for me.
Speak for me.
When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, may the love we give
May the love we give
speak for me.
speak for me.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.